Seaport District at Pier 17, brought to you by Chase. We got breaking news. The potential top pick in next year's NFL draft has been suspended. Details are murky, but they're coming in. We have the latest right off the top. Then Raiders, Chargers, dramatic Thursday night game that went right down to the final play. We will take you through all of that. And we're load managing rookies now. A crazy day for the sport and a problem that isn't going anywhere. Jay, Will, and I will disagree as we continue. But let's start again, as mentioned, with the breaking news. This just came over in the last half hour. The potential number one pick in next year's NFL draft, Chase Young. Everyone acknowledges he's the best player in college football. He will not play tomorrow against Maryland. The Ohio State Athletic Department is looking into a possible NCAA violation from 2018. That is all the information we have as of right now. Obviously, we have a lot of reporters working this story. Take a look at some of the numbers here. He's had a monster season this year. His 13.5 sacks, second most in a single season in Ohio State history, and that's with 5 games still remaining. The other guys on that list, legends who were Super Bowl champions or first-round picks, every single one of them, and this kid is every bit as good, if not better, than any of them. So I want to start by setting up, for those of you who don't know, Bobby Carpenter, you played at Ohio State, you live in Columbus, and you host a radio show in Columbus. What do you make of this situation?
Trying to talk and reach out to some people. It's radio silent over at the Woody Hayes at Ohio State, and I think that probably bodes well, meaning they're trying to investigate this thing, get ahead of it, and hopefully it's a situation where, if it's something where there was some improper benefits or something like that, when it's maybe more of the 2-game suspension variety or maybe a 3-game, and this wouldn't bleed into any type of postseason play.
Well, how many games do they have before they play Penn State?
They have 2.
That's the interesting one, because they have 2 monster games on their schedule as we go forward. They play Penn State, who right now is ranked number 4, and then obviously the Michigan game. And as NFL teams will look at this again, we will not speculate in any way. This literally could be anything at this point to our knowledge. But the NFL is drooling over this kid, right?
No doubt about it. Look, it would take a lot for this kind of thing to affect his draft stock in any significant way. He plays a premium position. He's a premium player. You see the list of the names of other Ohio State people that he's chasing right now as far as the sack record is concerned. Look, you're right. You don't want to speculate here. You have no idea what this even entails. But this kid is going to make a lot of money. He's going to play a long time on Sunday.
Vilma and Sanchez, you guys cover college football for us every weekend. You see them on Saturday afternoons. I mean, John, how would you put into words what losing him for an extended period would mean to that team?
Ohio State loses number 1 ranking. Ohio State possibly loses to Penn State, and they're out of the college football playoff if they lose to Penn State or Michigan. That's how important he is. The reason I had Ohio State number 1 was because of Chase Young and how dominant he is on defense. There is no player like him for LSU. There's no player like him for Alabama. There's no player like him for Penn State. No player like him for Clemson. He is the reason Ohio State's number 1.
He could start on all those teams. Vilma said it early in the year. This is my first year doing this stuff, and I had no idea who this kid was, but he's amazed me on film. You got to put an APV out on him anytime you play him because you got to chip him with backs, double team him with tight ends and tackles. He's a monster.
Bobby is texting people. Every time you get a text, I see it.
He's looking down. I mean, there's not a ton of information. I don't believe that it's anything legal in nature, like Lewis said, like that would affect his draft stock. It's, I think, something more about impermissible benefits, potentially agent-related, something like that, as opposed to anything that would bring up his credibility as a human being.
Bobby Schefter, thank you.
We'll keep an eye on this. If there are
Bobby Schefter, I like
any further details, obviously we pass them along immediately. It's an enormous story. Now we go to last night's game, the last ever scheduled primetime game in Oakland, which makes me sad to see.
Plays one of these sequences where you thought the momentum was going to shift for Oakland, and that bonehead errors were eventually going to do them in. But Derek Carr, he was on it all night as well.
Now, so you see we're in the final 30 seconds of the half, and that's Carr to Alec Ingold, who takes it in. We got a good game, 17-14 Oakland at the half. Fourth quarter, Chargers down 3, 2nd and goal in the red zone. They had these long drives. This is a 12-play drive. Austin Eckler takes it in, so it's 24-20 in favor of the Chargers, but the Raiders will not give up. Derek Carr bringing them down the field.
Look, Derek right now has said he is in the offense that he's always dreamed of being in. He's totally comfortable with what John wants. He understands what John wants in critical situations. And here, a game-winning fourth-quarter drive, he put it all on display.
That's Josh Jacobs, the rookie, who takes it in. They're fired up in Oakland. but they would miss the extra point. So it's a 2-point game. A field goal would beat them. The Chargers would have plenty of time on the clock for Phillip Rivers. But on this final drive, in which a penalty, a defensive holding on that play, would give them a separate set of downs, a new set of downs, Rivers would wind up going 0 for 7 with the game on the line, Lewis. And in the end, he would throw an interception on a final 4th down.
Yeah, this really called into question some of the play calling for the Chargers. They had run the ball successfully all night long. They had all 3 timeouts on this last drive. They only needed a field goal, and they didn't have that far to go. So for them to go 0 for 7 and not attempt to run the football, it called into question a lot of the tactics used. But without a doubt, this falls on Phillip Rivers, some of the mistakes he was making as far as not moving defensive backs with his eyes and tossing the ball up for easy interceptions.
Rivers threw 3 picks and 2 others that were called back by penalty. Meanwhile, John Gruden celebrating with the fans in Oakland. A huge win for the Raiders.
We got a lot of resilient guys. They're going to keep competing. You know, you may beat us, but we're going to be a hard out. We are very happy with our foundation, our process. A lot of guys deserve credit, but I'm exhausted. 2 games in 4 days is something I hate.
I obviously wish I'd have played better when you turn it over, when you throw 2 interceptions early. I mean, the last one counts, I know, on the board, but the 2 interceptions and then 8 plays not getting anything. I'm disappointed I didn't do a better job in those 2 spots especially.
Let's talk about Rivers for a minute here. I saw Bill Barnwell put out a list of the greatest quarterbacks never to play in the Super Bowl, and he had Phillip Rivers number 1. And I believe Rivers is going to be a Hall of Famer. But as we watch him right now, Mark, I'll start with you. Does it look like we're seeing the end of an era here for Rivers with the Chargers?
Unfortunately, it does, and this is a guy I've watched as a kid, you know, and when they were in San Diego, growing up in Orange County, California, it was him and LaDainian Tomlinson. And, I mean, it crushes me to see that, but
all the issues that Eli had playing, you could tell his level of play had clearly declined, yet there was nothing the organization wanted to do about it until they were forced to do something about it. It's the same thing, just not getting as much press coverage out.
And they, of course, were traded for each other on draft day, so an appropriate comparison. Let me swing it to the Raiders here quickly because we have so much going on. Bobby, are you watching a playoff team, do you feel like, when you watch the Raiders play?
Yeah, because they're playing complete football right now. They have a good defense that can make plays, put their offense in good situations, and they're able to run the ball. Like John Gruden, for as much as people talk about him as being this pass offensive head coach, you look at his teams in Tampa, you look at what he liked to do in Oakland the first time. He wants to line up and be big and physical and pound the football. They have the running back in Jacobs to be able to do it, and he's using that without Derek Carr turning the football over. Great team right now.
Look, if you go back to John's history in Tampa Bay when he had Cadillac Williams as a rookie runner, he ran the wheels off of Cadillac Williams. He's doing the same thing with Josh, who comes into the NFL with not a whole lot of tread on his tires because of his usage or his lack of usage at Alabama, which boded well for him. All these other rookies, Max Crosby, Cleveland Ferrell, Jonathan Abram, although he's hurt, all these kids are playing tremendous roles for this football team. They have one of the biggest, strongest, most physical offensive line. Remember this name. From a veteran standpoint, when they signed Richie Incognito, people thought, what are you doing signing Richie Incognito? I was one of the people who said that. You see him on film right now? He's mauling people, and he's helping establish that new identity for his football team. They're going to have to be reckoned with in November and December.
Oh, by the way, they now have the mini bye, right? They play a Thursday. They have some time off, and then they play the Bengals and the Jets. The Raiders are staring at 7-4 and in really good shape in what feels like a very wide open AFC. All right, much more from the NFL as we go, but now to the game of the year, which is tomorrow, and it's Bama LSU. Bama 78-4 at home since 2008. I pointed this out yesterday. They lose at home so infrequently you can remember all the games. That was Cam Newton in the 2010 Iron Bowl, down 24-0. They came all the way back to win. Then in 2011, the game of the century against LSU. This was the legendary 9-6 game. No touchdowns were scored. LSU won in overtime. Remember, Bama then beat them for the championship later. In 2012 is the Manziel game. Johnny Manziel threw for 253 yards, ran for 92 more. Aggies led 20-0 and never looked back. So that's the third game they lost. And then the one people generally forget is when Ole Miss beat them. Ole Miss went in there and led by as many as 20. Alabama turned it over 5 times, tied for their most in any game under Nick Saban. And that's it. 78-4 they are at home over the last 11 years. And we have you covered all morning long on this enormous game between LSU and Alabama. And so let's go live. There he is. Tom Rinaldi is in Tuscaloosa. He's been there all week long with Bama. Tom, Tua still progressing, hoping to start tomorrow. What has his rehab looked like?
You know, one quick note on what you just said there, Greeny. For further perspective, consider after that first season for Nick Saban here, he's won more national championships than he's lost games at Bryant-Denny. Think about that as a number for some perspective. In terms of Tua, when we say it's a 24-hour process for the training staff to get him ready, perhaps this is the simplest proof. If you went over to Tua Tagovailoa's dorm room where he rooms with his brother, Talia, you would find 2 small units placed there by the training staff. One is a compression sleeve that Tua sleeps in. The other is a cold compress machine so that he's able to alternate between hot and cold treatments. The training staff has broken up 48-hour increments from the moment that the surgery happened to try to get him prepared to play Saturday, and every expectation points to that happening.
Is the expectation that it's one thing to play, it's another thing to be able to play at his maximum, and obviously moving around is such an incredibly important part of what he does well, that magic that he has. You have any sense of whether he is expected to be able to be at his sort of magical best in that way?
Twofold, 2 ways to answer that. The first is during the periods of practice open to media observation, Greeny, the design through the week by Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator, has been to increase the number of drills where Tua is expected to take snaps in the shotgun, roll out, and throw on the run to show some burst to see how quick he is, how comfortable he is, and how accurate he is. From our observation, he passed every one of those metrics in flying colors. Number 2, there's been no obvious setback according to the training staff, so the expectation is Tua will play well. Obviously, he hasn't been chased by somebody 25 yards on the LSU defensive front. That'll be a different situation. But the expectation is Tua will play and play well, but live to fight another day. Don't look for 15 and 20-yard scrambles. That would probably create an apoplectic Nick Saban on the sideline.
Well, there is no better Nick Saban than the apoplectic Nick Saban. Tommy, well done. Thank you, my man. We will see you. Look forward to your coverage all day long. And we're going to go live to LSU a little later in this hour as well. But let me bring it here, my college football crew, all 3 of you guys. Let's talk about the ankle and how you would think it affects him. He's going to give it a go. If he can play, he's going to play. But how do you think the ankle specifically affects his ability to be that sort of magic man that he sometimes is?
Of course, they need him to be able to move around in the pocket, those short bursts, and then those big scrambles down the field. That can gash your defense, and it just breaks their back as a defense. And it's really on Coach Sarkisian, who was my coordinator at USC. Get him some early completions, get him going, get the adrenaline going so he stops worrying about that ankle and just plays.
Vilma, I know you have some specific tape to look at of Tua here.
Yeah, when you watch Tua, he's equally as good inside the pocket, sitting there and taking 5 seconds to throw the ball down the field as he is when he scrambles. So when you watch a guy like Tua right here, you're watching the Ole Miss defense was coached literally, do not go and try to rush this man because he will throw right behind you for a touchdown. And instead, he just runs it in. You completely lose all your instincts defensively because of how good he is. And then when you watch Tua here when he was hurt, this is a championship game in 2018 versus Georgia. Watch how his ability or inability to get out of the pocket and then extend the play is what was the reason he actually got pulled in the 4th quarter, if you remember that game. And if he can't do that, he can't extend, LSU's defense is fast, LSU's defense is physical. If he cannot pull away from them, and then now we're talking about, he's stuck in the pocket, it'll be a long day.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it means to me the fact that you want to protect your quarterback. And how do you do that? By running the football. And if you look at the history of this series and you go back to 2011, there's been 3 one-score games. That's when it's been tight. LSU won in 2011, overtime in 2012, 2014, 4-point game. What was the common theme in this? Was the fact that LSU rushed more times per game. And so getting Najee Harris going right there, take the heat off of Tua. Don't ask him to drop back 45 times and run around. These coaches are both defensive guys at heart. Nick Saban, Ed Orgeron, they love to run the football. And I know Nick's going to try to do that to protect him with Najee
Bobby,
Harris.
the only thing I'd say to that, it's a very different LSU offense that Alabama's facing, right? LSU offense before, it was just running three yards in a cloud of dust for the whole game and hope to win 9-6. This time you're talking about Joe Burrow. If they say, sure, run the ball, I love for you to do that. Thank you. Okay, it's my turn. Down the field touchdown. That's the only thing I'm saying. It's a different LSU offense.
Well, it's such a different game. When we think of LSU and Alabama, when we think of the SEC in general, that you're making exactly the right point. Yeah. Traditionally, we're thinking of these defensive teams that want to run the football. We got star quarterbacks. We got star receivers all over the place.
I mean, last year you saw Joe Burrow with 7-man protection versus 8-man drop on Nick Saban's defense, and he's standing there holding the ball in the pocket like, what do I do? This year they line up in empty. They're motioning receivers all over the field. He majors in getting that ball down the field in the air now. We're talking about an LSU trigger man. That's never happened before.
As I mentioned, we'll go live to LSU a little later, about 15 minutes from now. We'll do that. Meanwhile, let's go back to the NFL quickly. It's been a first half to forget for Odell Beckham and the Browns. They're 2-6 going into this week's matchup with the 6-2 Bills. And Beckham has just 39 catches. Yesterday, he reflected on how he's handled all the adversity of this season.
I've just grown. I've come to a different place, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, however you want to put it. That energy still tries to find its way to get me upset, whether it's something about a cleat or a visor or all these little stupid things that the only people who are worried about them are the people who are doing and saying something about them. People just want to see me break. I think they want to see that side that was in there with what I was dealing in another situation. Nothing's ever gonna really bother me. I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna do my job, I'm gonna try and give 110 every time that I can go, and that's just it.
So it's an interesting time in the football season. We spent some time in our first hour talking about the Browns, and so many of the fingers wound up being pointed at the head coach there and Freddie Kitchens. And then you look at some other situations, like the Jets and the Giants play this weekend. The Jets coach, Adam Gase, is in the middle of a lot of that sort of thing. And if the Giants should lose this game, then maybe Pat Shurmur's name starts to come up a little bit more with that as well. From a front office perspective, Louis, give me a sense of how teams are considering if they're going to make a coaching change, or they're pretty sure they're going to make a coaching change. How do they start considering doing that in November?
Well, what you wind up doing is you start looking at the state of your football team and whether or not you're seeing continual progression as far as the development of particularly your young players, and are you still really keeping the attention of the veteran players, and are they still buying in, or are those guys checking out and the young players getting worse? And if you look at, just use those two criteria and look at some of these football teams, when you look at the Cleveland Browns, do you see their young players getting better? Do you see Baker Mayfield getting better? Do you see these guys continuing to, and do you see the veteran players seeming like they're continuing to really buy into what seemingly would be the message there? I don't see it that way.
No to all.
Exactly. So if you then apply it to the New York Jets, we already know what that situation looks like. And then with the Giants, it's a little different. I watched them up close and personal last week. They're still playing hard. Daniel Jones, a lot of the things that are happening with him are self-inflicted and self-imposed. Steve Young did a tremendous breakdown on Daniel Jones as far as what he needs to do is to keep from turning the football over as far as fumbles are concerned. That had nothing really to do with Pat Shurmur. It has to do with the fact that Daniel's a young rookie quarterback who needs an offseason and needs to continue to progress. But I'll tell you this, the Giants overall, you lose to the Jets, the optics are horrible. Uh-oh. They're horrible. This fan base, this city will go nuts. And owners listen to that kind of stuff. And if you see this football team that for 2 years now hasn't really started to trend the right way, they could be another team that's on the block.
Well, let me ask you guys as players. I'm just curious. When all this talk is out there about the coach, Mitch Trubisky wants to turn the TVs off. But generally speaking, you're going to hear what people are saying. What is it like if you're the quarterback of a football team and everyone's saying your coach is about to get fired?
Especially now with your phone, with as the quarterback, you get the PR guy telling you right before you go on the podium, hey, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. So you just get this download, and it's like, oh, Rex is on the hot seat. Or so-and-so said this about Rex. You're just like, dang. Okay, what else?
Well,
it's hard enough to win.
How does it affect you as a player?
I mean, you can't change your approach, but it's hard enough to win games as it is. Now it's just extra noise. It's extra crap that you deal with.
To go off what Louis said, I mean, everybody's been on a team before where you've been teetering a little bit. Are you still going in? You're still watching the extra film of the guys playing hard? You can see those effort pieces. And if the veterans quit doing it, that's why the rookies start to fail, because they think this is just how you operate. 4:30 practice is over, you walk out the door, you're not watching that extra film and trying to make sure everybody's still on the same page.
We talk about this now as the season's gone on, but a lot of this played itself out in the offseason. You see a lot of the players when they're not putting in the work in the offseason, the extra time in catching the ball or working out, that's where you know if you're going to have a really good team or not.
Yeah, you can. Look, I'm just a fan at the end of the day. Sometimes you think you can see these things on the field, which teams are doing that and which ones aren't. And if the teams aren't, then maybe making a change now makes more sense than it wouldn't otherwise. Meanwhile, as we continue here on Get Up, why has Joe Burrow been so good this year? We'll show you the secrets to his success. And we mentioned we got live reports coming up from LSU. Plus, when Zion returns, there may be some disappointed fans out there. Is it possible? We're going to talk about load management for a